Hey all, thanks for tuning in. I'm Tommy, and in my last video I started going over the details of a TJ-6 conversion, where you want to modify the body, and of course that's going to tie into the frame and the rear suspension and all that. And it started running a little bit long, so I decided to break it up into two. The first part was basically covering the body, the sheet metal and all that, where you want to cut it and so forth, and why. And the next part is going to be the body the chassis and the rear suspension. So because my Jeep is a little bit different in that regard, I thought it might be appropriate to give you a little bit of a rundown on the Jeep and explain, kind of what I'm working with and how it may or may not be different from, whatever you're working with. So anyway, that's kind of why I broke this up into two videos. So if you haven't watched part one on the sheet metal and the body work, and you're interested in a TJ-6 conversion, I suggest you go take a look at that one. And then from this one, we'll start off going over a little bit of the details of the Jeep, and then step over to the rear frame and discuss where and why to cut the frame. So let's get to it. Okay, so rather than doing a full walk around of the Jeep, which I think would probably be relatively boring, I'll give you a quick little rundown of where the Jeep sits right now. So the suspension front and rear, I built it myself. It's a kind of a hybrid long arm, mid arm setup, 3-link up front, semi-triangulated 4-link in the rear. And Dana 30, Dana 44, factory axle housings. They're both got alloys, 488s, ARBs. The rear is even 35 spline, so it's got some pretty heavy duty axle shafts in it. And believe it or not, Jeep's only seen 35s and 37s in the 13 years I've owned it. And I've only had 2 axle shaft issues up front. And I don't wheel it. I'm not stupid, but okay, maybe I am. But I'm careful with my equipment. So I definitely challenge myself. I challenge my Jeep and do a lot of, interesting, fun obstacles, but I don't just beat on my equipment senseless. So the Dana 30's actually been holding up pretty well. Nonetheless, I know I want bigger, I want stronger, I want better. So all that's going away. Front bumper, I just picked that up. That's a JCR bumper. The Highline aluminum flares, these are from JCR. This is was it Duraflex or something? It's a little fiberglass hood. It's super light, and I had some body work done on it to kind of remove the hood pin latches, or the hood latches. Somebody would be doing hood pins on this one. And the plan up front is to get rid of these 37s with the Poison Spider bead locks. I've got a set of 40s with some KMC bead locks that'll be going on here. And let's see, I've got a set of 14-inch ORIs that'll be replacing the coil spring setup in the front, and hopefully stretching the front axle forward a few inches. I'm going to see how far I can go without moving the steering box. If I have to remove the steering box to get the wheelbase I want, I may do that now. I may wait and kind of, do that later on down the road, because this is a pretty big project, trying to do a TJ-6 and 1 tons and new suspension all at once. So I may decide to do the steering box relocation later on. So, but we'll see. We'll see when we get there. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else up front. It's got hydro assist, and I got an anti-rock, but once I go with the ORIs, I've also got a ORO sway lock front setup, and I may end up using that. I may end up using the anti-rock, or I may not use anything, because with the ORIs you can really tune the pressures above and below the piston in the shock and really control body roll. We're going to see if that works out, but regardless, if it doesn't get the body roll under control the way I want, I've got these I can throw back on there, so shouldn't be too big of a problem. Under the hood, stock 4-liter. For now, eventually plan will be an LS, but that's down the road. And 5-speed manual with a stock 231 transfer case for now. 4-speed Atlas is on order, so that'll be pretty exciting. That'll be fun when that gets here. And that's about it up front. So we'll move around to the back because that's going to be what's kind of more interesting with regards to how it's going to impact the TJ-6 conversion, because there's been a lot of work done back there, much more so than the front. So let me show you that. Okay, so now we're at the more interesting part of my Jeep and what makes it, this is where most of the work has been done, frankly, and this is what makes it a lot more unique. And it's gonna, the beginning of what kind of will show you what's gonna pose some interesting challenges for me to do a TJ-6 stretch that hopefully you won't have to worry about. So about 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to stretch the Jeep. Factory wheelbase wasn't going to cut it, and I wanted to do, like most TJ owners, I wanted more wheelbase. And so I started looking into doing stretches. I picked up a Genrite gas tank. I think it's the comp tank. So it's supposed to allow like what, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches or something like that. We'll allow for that much stretch. The problem is where the where the frame rail goes. The factory frame rail comes up right here, and then it curves, and then it comes back down. And it's always bugged the hell out of me on a stretched Jeep when you see the axle center line and the hump on the frame no longer aligning. Aggravates the hell out of me. It's just personal preference. There's nothing functionally wrong with it. I just don't like the look, plain and simple. So I picked up this Undercover Fab back half kit. Anyway, but basically what that allowed me to do is to move the wheelbase back, and because I was doing all this custom fab work, I was able to get the gas tank to go a little bit farther back than the factory frame would have allowed, which was a little bit of a side benefit. And then I Frenched in these shock towers. I believe these are from Synergy, and I've got 12-inch ORIs in here, and they've been back here since 2006, early 2016. So they've been back here almost 4 years now. And I really like them. That's the reason I got some for the front. So, and basically, so that's basically what I'm looking at doing. When I did that's where I'm at back here. And with regards to the suspension, I redid all the suspension links when I back halved the Jeep, and decided at that point I didn't want a long arm suspension setup anymore. I got tired of the control arm brackets catching on ledges and everything. So I went to more of a mid arm length. That helped things out, but I still don't like it. And I want to try to address that. But again, that's not really the focus of this video. But I will show you how it is going to pose an interesting issue for me. So anyway, that's kind of, that's about it for the rear of the Jeep and what makes it not stock. So let me show you where the suspension attaches and where you're going to want to cut the frame, or at least where I think it's a good idea to cut the frame to graft in that extra 15 inches. Okay, so now we're looking at the passenger side of the Jeep towards the rear. It's the rear control arm, the control arm bracket, body mount. So where I see most people cutting the frame, and I think it makes really good sense. See these two horizontal oval cutouts? Vertical cutouts here. Basically, you can take a measurement there. You can cut through the middle here. And then when you put it back together, you have this reference measurement. You can add 15 inches. So when you're splicing everything back together with that extra 15 inches of frame material, you can measure off of these two surfaces here, and you'll know you're getting the exact 15 inches that you need. So on a factory Jeep, the control arm bracket is somewhere back here. And so you can cut right here and you're golden. You don't have any effect. You don't have to remove the rear suspension. For me, obviously, I've got this guy here in the way. So that's going to pose some interesting issues for me. I also, some people say, well, why don't you just, the body mount's going to have to move, and it's going to have to attach to the new frame rail section. So this is going to have to get cut away. So you might say, well, why not just cut the body back here instead? And I could do that. but here's the thing. I want to cut this control arm bracket out anyway because I'm going to try to do something a little bit different. See, right now, I'm always hitting on ledges. I'm always hitting right here, and it's just, it's really frustrating. And I like to keep a low Jeep, as low as I can get away with, and that means this is going to hit even more. So I'm looking into a couple of things. I may inboard the control arm brackets. For the lowers, I may try to outboard them because the Sterling 10.5-inch rear axle is going to be plenty wide. I could potentially outboard them here, but that means I'll have to do something about this body mount. You know, or I may leave this bracket down here or build a new bracket, but then that means I'll probably want to bridge the gap between the front and the rear control arm brackets because I'd rather have a low skid than this abrupt hit. So anyway, so that's, you know, that's all up in the air right now. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do here, but that's what's going to, you know, pose some interesting issues for me. Factory TJ, no worries. This control arm bracket's somewhere back here. You can, you know, you've got free reign all through here. It'll make it much simpler. As far as the material here, this is, I think it's like 2.5 by 4-inch material. This is not run-of-the-mill standard stuff you can get. It can get really pricey. So if you can get frame rail sections from a wrecked Jeep or something like that, you know, definitely go for it. Some people will actually make their own. And then when you splice this in, what I plan to do is put a large fish plate across the backside or the inside of the frame rail. And then I'll be sleeving it on the inside as well and then drilling some holes for some rosettes, you know, front and back, inside, outside, all that kind of good stuff. So should be plenty strong. So anyway, that's kind of it for the rear suspension, at least where the, you know, how it's going to, a TJ-6 conversion is going to affect where you cut the frame and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, you can cut it other places. I just think it makes really good sense to cut it right here because of these factory marks here. You take good measurements off of that, good to go. All right, so the last little bit that's going to be kind of interesting is when I did the back half of the Jeep, because these frame rails were shorter than I would have preferred, it meant that they had to attach to the frame rail rather high. You know, it's kind of difficult to explain, but trust me on it. And so I ended up Frenching the frame rails up into the body. Now that was cool because it gives me a really great departure angle, but it meant that I had to remove a lot of material from the back of the tub, and quite a bit of that is structural. What ends up happening is I've got a super slim body mount back here, and it's simply too small. And what happens is the frame will flex and catch up into the body here a little bit, and over time, you can see it's busted. I think this is just seam sealer that's holding this in place. So I've got a plan to reinforce that and strengthen it, and then I'm also going to get some more clearance around here for the frame rail. So again, if you're, you know, stock TJ, you're not going to have to worry about any of this kind of stuff, but this is something that isn't affected by the TJ-6 conversion. This is just something that I want to address. So there you have it. Now you have an idea of how I plan to convert my Jeep to a TJ-6, and because I've already got a 6-inch wheelbase stretch from factory, that should put me at, you know, which is a little 99.5 inches. That'll put me just shy of 115 inches once the conversion's done. Plus, I hope to get a few inches out of the front. Ultimate goal, at least for now, is to get close to a 4-doors wheelbase, but with less weight and better approach and departure angles. So we'll see how that works out. But I feel like I'm on the right track here, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I really appreciate you following along, and I'll see about getting some updates up here fairly soon. Thanks a lot, everybody.